On this historical ship, the Mayflower, was a group of Puritans who personified great courage, faith, and determination. Their resolve was to be set free from the abuses and corruption of the Church of England, a course that would one day revolutionize the New World. The Puritans, who were also known as saints or separatists, stood out among the rest for their disapproval of the Church of England. They rejected the tyrannical rule of James I and showed much disdain for the Catholic persuasion on the Anglican Church. However, their attempts to reform the church from within had little influence. They were considered outcasts and perceived as a growing threat. However, despite the increased persecution, the Puritans' devotion to the Christian faith remained strong. So strong, in fact, that they were willing to abandon their homeland and even risk death. It was in the year of 1608 that their bold faith and undying resilience to be free sprang into action. Under the direction of John Robinson, 125 Puritans secretly fled from the brutal dictatorship of England to Holland. They knew that Holland was not their final destination, but indeed a step closer to fulfilling their hopeful dream to one day be free from tyranny and establish their own holy commonwealths in America. For many, the past 12 years in Holland was tolerable, yet it became a hardship for most. Jobs were scarce, making it difficult for the Puritans to provide for their families. Those who did find work labored tirelessly to bring home what little they could earn. The Dutch culture also grew to be a bad influence on the Puritan children and was a matter of grave concern for the parents. Nonetheless, Holland was a great test for the Puritans. It not only strengthened their faith, but also kept them from giving up. Notwithstanding the strict laws and the previous failed attempts that landed some in jail, the Puritans pressed on and believed God for a miracle. They strongly believed that if their children were to have futures filled with freedom, then God would make a way for them to set sail to the New World. Remarkably, after much prayer and persuading certain authorities, the Puritans received permission from the London Company to voyage across the Atlantic Ocean to Virginia. This certainly was an answer to prayer, but it offered no firm guarantees. The Puritans would still have to consider how they would survive the rough passage to such a faraway land. Knowing the risks, they bravely moved forward to go to America. For them, risking their lives so that their children and their future generations would be free from tyranny and war was worth the cost of life. America was now their hope. It was their God-given destiny. And so the Puritans, now called the Pilgrims, sailed to the New World in search of a newfound life that would permit them the freedom to live out their Christian beliefs as they desired. But to meet the uncertainties that lie ahead, the Puritans would need a leader of unprecedented measure. Reluctantly, their search did not take them long. Born in the remote village of Austerfield, Yorkshire in England, William Bradford, one of the original 125 separatists who fled to Holland back in 1608, would take on the role as the Puritans' leader. He would become one of America's most legendary pioneers. Now all that remained was to get on the Mayflower and arrive safely in America. On September 16, 1620, Bradford and 34 other original Puritans from 1608 set sail from England. However, the journey would not be an easy one. The elements of the sea were relentless on the ship, as well as the people and the crew on board. Many underwent severe seasickness. Long into the journey, the Mayflower suffered a massive blow from a gigantic wave, causing structural damage to the top side of the ship. Christopher Jones, the Mayflower's master, felt obliged to turn back the ship for fear they wouldn't reach America. However, with weeks already into the journey, the Pilgrims believed that God would overcome any adversity they faced. They trusted God wouldn't have gotten them this far just to have them turn back. Sure, they knew the risk was great, but the reward was far greater. Finally, after 65 long and harsh days, the 102 people aboard the Mayflower landed at Plymouth and Cape Cod on November 21st, 1620. But the excitement of arriving to America was short-lived. Rather than arriving in Virginia in the heat of the summer, They landed hundreds of miles off course at the beginning of winter. At this point of the journey, 2 people had already died, and many more aboard the ship were plagued with fatal illnesses. Very little food and water remained. In the first year, over half of the 102 people who arrived on the Mayflower had died. And yet, despite the hunger, despair, and harsh conditions, the remaining few Puritans found a way to survive. Notwithstanding the many deaths that occurred on the Mayflower, this voyage set the mark for many more to come. It was on this voyage that the Mayflower Compact was drafted and signed on November 11, 1620. This historic document was the first of its kind to establish the equal rights contract under the division and power of the God of Christianity, and would later be incorporated into the U.S. Constitution.